All right, I think we're live now with another episode of the Growth Galleries Masterclass. They were covering the Starry Landscape Stacker, which is a simple way for you to stack your sky photos on a Apple Mac computer. And this is an alternative to what we discussed last week, where we talked about the PixInsight software, which provides a relatively complex way to do this. And my goal with this one is to make sure that this type of stacking is accessible to everyone. So this tool has some pretty cool features that you can use. So like the stacking software I showed last week will only stack your sky, the Starry Landscape Stacker, and then also software we'll discuss next week for Windows computers will cover the ability to not only stack your sky but also the foreground as well. So it's got some cool features around that. We'll talk about how that works. So yeah, we're gonna get started in a sec here, but we'll give people a minute to join. And if you've been enjoying these master classes, make sure you like the video, write some comments, and give any feedback that you might have, any topics you might want to hear about and want me to cover, and I'll be sure to try to cover those topics in the future. So, all right, so let's hop over to the Starry Landscape Stacker here. So you can see the software looks something like what you're seeing here. It pops up with this menu by default when you first open the application. So yeah, I haven't used this software in a few years, so I actually had to go purchase it from the App Store. So if you just so you can know where to find this, you can search Google. It shows up if you search for Starry Landscape Stacker. And if you're on your Mac and you go down to your applications and App Store and then search there, the app is available for purchase and download there. There's two versions of this, one that's does the sky and the foreground together, and another one that's dedicated for just the sky. I think this week when I was looking there was a deal on both of them, so you could get it for like super cheap. I think it was like $25. So this is not super expensive software. It's meant to simplify a very complex process, and when playing with it the last 3 days now, I feel like it does a pretty good job of what it intends to do. So if this is the first time you're seeing the software, you probably want to click on the Learn How here. This will take you to a web page. They have a nice video explaining what are the recommended settings depending on how you captured your data. So I'm not going to cover that in too much detail here. One thing that was mentioned in that video, if you go watch it, is that you might not use fixed settings for color balance, which I strongly recommend against whenever you're shooting any type of images that you're going to stack. Everything should be fixed. You should have fixed shutter, aperture, ISO, color balance, anything else that could be variable in your image, focus, everything needs to be fixed. There should be no variability there, and that will definitely help you get much better results. So yeah, if I were you, that's how I shoot all my images, and I would strongly recommend that you follow that same process. So after you've watched the video, maybe you don't want to see this pop up again every time, so you'll click Don't Ask and go to No Thanks here. And then it'll pop up a window where you can select images. So there's images here that I have in my Bryce Canyon folder that I shot last September. So we're gonna pick a few of these. I pre-selected a few that seem to demonstrate some of the functionalities well here. So this will be the first image, and we'll cover one other image that I took at Mesa Verde and cover a slightly different use case than this specific one. So check my notes here, which images we're supposed to select here. All right, so it's 765 to 775. So these are a few of the images I've selected, and we'll import those. We get this settings menu here where you can adjust the different settings. So I'm not doing any of these adjustments here. You can play with the different ones here. They may or may not help you. There's also the temperature and tint settings here that you can change. And the video that in the link recommended that if you're shooting images the way I do, you should reduce the contrast a little bit before you do your integration. So I'll just do that to 0.7 or something. I'll click done. So there are ways to change these default settings. I don't know if we can get to the menus right now. Oh, maybe we can. All right, yeah, so let's go through that right now. So you see here we have the different color profiles. You can select the Pro Photo or Adobe RGB. You probably won't see a big difference between selecting one or the other. Depends on if you have a specific output a color that you're trying to set to. And we won't talk about the color here, but there is a good discussion to be had about which one you're selecting for different use cases, whether you're printing your photos or putting them on social media, etc. The different color profiles, they can like change the look and feel of your image. And so for me, right, like I might want to set this, if I'm gonna go adjust this every time, maybe I set this to something lower so that I don't have to manually set it every time, but the default is 1 here. The exposure, my images are properly exposed. If you had underexposed images or something, or overexposed images, you may want to reduce this exposure or increase it appropriately. Let's see here. So there's you can fix the white balance to a specific thing, or you can copy from the raw files. Since my white balance is fixed in all my files, I'll just use whatever is the default in the files. And again, like if you're post-processing your photos, you'll probably make very little difference if you're using one or the other here. You should be able to just adjust the temperature and tint in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever you're using to edit after you do the integration. So you can show different types of warnings, different things that may or may not be useful. And yeah, so those are the main settings. It's very simple. There's like literally like I think less than 10 settings here. So working through them, making sure you understand what they all do is probably useful. And yeah, and you can play with different ones. If you want to try to do noise reduction here or color noise reduction here, you can do that. You might get better results. I really find that the color noise reduction in Photoshop does really well. So I probably won't use this alternatives like color noise reduction for this. But like you could try it and see how your results are coming out. So now that we selected the settings, we can select done here, and this will process the 11 images that I imported, and it'll take a sec here and they'll pop up in the menu, and then we can do the next step. All right, so as you can see here, we have a bunch of red dots all over the sky here, right? So what this is doing is like selecting what is the sky and what is the foreground. So we have to make sure that the software knows which is which so that it can properly blend the images together. So I guess maybe we'll cover a little bit of the interface here, right? So the workflow happens in steps. The first step is, like I was mentioning, is selecting dots so that you know where the sky is. Then you would edit the sky. So this is, if you're familiar with Photoshop or like masking in Lightroom, this is the same thing. You're just masking the sky from the foreground. So when you do the blend, that things like look clean. Then you have the option to choose which is your reference image for alignment. Or it will just automatically select one. I don't know if it uses the first one or probably just uses the first one. Don't see why it would use a different algorithm than that. And then you can exclude images. If you're going through your frames, you import 100 frames or something, and one of them is bad or something like that, then 2 of them, you can remove that image from the integration, which will cause things to operate more smoothly. You'll get a better result if you get rid of any like bad images. But so you can either remove your images through this software, looking through the images one by one, or you can like do that before you import here in Adobe Bridge or some other tool. So once you've gone through that selection, then you can align and composite your images. When you get to that step, you'll have more options. And the final step would be to save your image to the disk so that you can do proper edits in a different software. So you don't normally do editing here, right? There's not really much controls on your edit other than like the contrast and exposure that we were looking at before, and those are on the raw files, and then they get integrated and you get a result, and then you have to if you want to make additional edits, which you probably should, you can do that in another software. So we'll walk through the process here now. Well, I guess we can mention the viewing controls. So basically, you can see what I'm seeing here. If I think if my image is too dark, I'm having trouble seeing the difference between the foreground and the sky or something. Make it brighter. If it's too bright, I can dim it like this. So so far with all my images, the defaults have worked well. Again, contrast, you can adjust that as well. Just this is not changing the actual image. This is just changing your viewing here and how it edits. And let's see here, the overlay opacity, that's going to be the red dots. So if you want the red dots to be more prominent, then you can make them brighter or you can make them dimmer. Again, that's not going to affect the image or the results. That's just for you to visually see how they're where they are on this image. And then we're currently viewing some kind of composite image. I'm not sure what a composite image is if we haven't actually aligned the images yet, but you can go here just to this menu and see each of the individual images, right? So, all right, now that we've done this, we want to go through the whole menu system, right? There's not too many menu items. If you have questions, be sure to ask them in the comments. We'll continue to color in the dots for the sky here. So some of the steps in these types of processes can be sort of tedious, but like if you're willing to put in the effort to make sure that the software is creating the right mass in the sky, you can get better results. And again, with a lot of these things, it's how much effort you want to put into it, and if you think the results you're gonna get that are better are worth the effort. So we'll probably do a couple of these masks once we get through it, and then you can kind of see based on the amount of time I put into it, like what the difference is in the result versus how much effort I put into it. Because if you're just posting to social media, a lot of things will not be visible on like a phone screen. But if you were trying to take this image and print it out on a very large scale, let's say 24 by 36 or larger like that, a whole lot of the details that you might not have to worry about in a social media post become very relevant when you're doing this sort of thing. So you just need to keep in mind what are your goals for the photo you're editing, and make sure that like you're spending the right amount of time based on what your goals are. So let's see here. You want to make sure that you select around the trees and stuff here, because it's really important for the software to know what is foreground, what is sky. So the more precise you are with this, the better the mask will be. And then once you've created the mask for the sky versus the foreground, then you'll have the chance to modify the changes of the mask that was auto-generated, which I highly recommend. I've tried merging a few different images here, and each time I've benefited from probably, I think I did 4 or 5 different images at least, through different types of data, different sessions. And the results were better when I modified the mask manually. So I guess quickly I should mention these images are not tracked. So these are single exposure images. I think they're about 5 seconds long. for each exposure. They are shot at 10,000 ISO, and they there's like 11 of them here. So this image is gonna have noise in it because the ISO is so high. But this was one of the best examples that I can find. I don't usually shoot specific foregrounds and skies that are shot together untracked, and I wanted to show that because that's what this software is actually intended to do. It's intended to merge untracked skies with a foreground, and so it automatically aligns things. So I tried with a tracked image to see if I could align, and we'll do one of those just to show how it works after we're done with this image. But like it did, the results were not very good. The foreground was not properly aligned. So if you're trying to track your sky, you should probably still shoot a separate foreground, and probably do that merging in Photoshop or Affinity or whatever like software you're using. All right, let's see. So we got a lot of dots here. The sky is almost covered here. See if there's any spots. Yeah, we should make sure it knows that's the sky. I don't know why I wouldn't. Could always mask it in if we need to. All right, so now that we have the sky mostly selected, including all these cloudy areas here, then we can select Find Sky. And so this computes the mask. It'll take a second. And you can see that this did pretty well. You can see very clearly there's some problems with this bush here, tree or whatever it was. You can see the horizon line here is not perfect. There's problems here. Yeah, you can see that we probably have to clean it up a little bit, but overall it looks like the sky was pretty well selected. And yeah, so let's just do an alignment and composite, and then we'll come back and check to see if we can make improvements. So we'll see how this works first, and then it should take a sec. All right, cool. So now we have the blended sky. You can see that the clouds are now trailing a little bit because they're blended together, which is a kind of cool effect since there's a bunch of seconds here. The horizon line is cut really cleanly. And you can see that the foreground blended relatively nicely, actually. I don't see any major issues other than maybe this spot here where there was a light or something shining. Might want to clean that up. But for the most part, like, I feel like this is an image that most people would be comfortable and happy to share to their Instagram feed, right? But I think we can do better if you're trying to get a perfectly good image. So, all right, one thing, right, we note here is that this tree, there were several branches that got cut off. The branches here are like blended out. Over here again, there does seem to be some artifacts over here. If I can not, there seems to be some artifacts here, so maybe we can clean that up a little bit. Yeah, these branches blended really nicely, actually. That looks actually really good. But I think with the other trees over here, for sure, those could definitely be better. We definitely lost some of the branches. So we can go back to the masking tool and play with that and try to make improvements. The good thing about this software is that you don't have to start over again. You can just jump back between the steps in the workflow. So now that I saw this first version, I see what I'm happy with it about, what I'm not happy with it about. I can literally jump back to edit sky again. So, all right, I know I have two options here with this. So let's start with the top here because it says start with. So there is a possibility that there could be objects in the sky that like show up as the foreground. So you have the option for the auto masking to select or not select those. So that's in this particular image, it's not going to make a big difference, right? Like maybe if you had like one cloud floating in here and you didn't spend the time to paint in the dots to mark it as the sky, then you might end up with a mask that thought the cloud was part of the foreground, but I tend to cover that up, so we don't have that problem here. But like if you were concerned about that, you could fix that maybe using this selection here. And then you have other options, and this is the painting options is what they call it. So this is like a brush tool if you're familiar with Photoshop or Lightroom masks. And then you can either paint in the sky or the ground, and then you can select the brush size here. So those are the options that you have with this software for blending. So we can see if we go through here that immediately this spot in the foreground here is not very good. So we can try to clean that up a little bit. So we'll make sure the brush size is smaller. We'll make sure the sky is selected because we want to paint in the sky. And then we'll start painting in over here. So just select that. And then maybe a little bit more over here. So, and then we could also try to clean up the tree here, but that blended in really nicely actually with the current thing here, right? So I don't know if we'll do much of cleaning up there, but if you were being really particular, you could go through here with a tiny brush and paint in, so only the branches are showing up. But like if the blending mode is giving you the right result, then I think that's probably good enough. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we see over here there's a bunch of the plants that look like they got masked out, right? So we want to select ground here and then try to figure out what's actually a plant and what's the sky, right? And make sure that we're blending the plant in here so that we're not losing details of the image, right? So this might take a little bit of trial and error, right? And you can just come here and paint until you see stuff that looks like it should be and should not be there. So see, if I remember correctly, there's like a branch right there, yeah. So you can see I was able to manifest a branch or something here in the sky that was in the original image that was masked out by the auto masking tool. You can choose whether to keep stuff like this in your image or not. Like maybe this branch is not actually helping the image, so then that can be a judgment call on your part if you want to do that. So we'll do some refinements on that here, but let's go around the bottom of the image here and see what other details we can find. Yeah, see, look, you can kind of see them in the image here, right, where it masked out the plant. So I would prefer to have the actual plant here, like all these branches got masked out. There's another. So again, right, a lot of this is going to end up being trial and error. Some of this stuff might actually make the image worse. We might have to come back and modify our mask. But you can see that we've got more of the bush here now. And I think the bush is mostly, I think there's another branch here, it looks like, yeah, that got removed altogether. So let's see. So we can try again to see how the blend works. So these masks are not completely perfect. So let's align a composite and see if it blends in nicely or if we need to do more retouching with the brush tool here. This will take a second here. And all right, let's see. So that's better. It looks like even though my masks weren't super precise, that the branches that we're missing are now kind of showing up in the image, and we're seeing more detail, right, than we were before. All right, so now it's not completely perfect. I'm not sure what's going on here, but there's a little bit of an artifact. I saw this in like the last few times I've been editing it. There's been somewhat of an artifact in here. I'm not sure if it's the clouds in the sky causing that, or one of these branches, or the mask. But like most people aren't going to notice that, and I really have to look closely to see it. People on social media definitely won't see it. So if we look along the whole horizon line here, make sure it looks pretty okay. I think this is this is looking solid here. So the next step, right, would be to save the current image. So we can save this in the Bryce Canyon folder here as this. Oh, actually, one more thing I should discuss. So there's different algorithms you can use for blending the images. So this is the minimum horizon noise, right? So you can do all different ones, minimum horizon noise with star deduping, mean horizon noise, the mean minimum horizon star dupe, right? So like these different algorithms might work better for specific images or over other images. And basically what it's trying to do is it's trying to blend this foreground horizon line here cleanly without causing problems. If we do something like max value, you'll probably, I don't know what you'll see actually here. You'll see all the lights in the foreground, so apparently there was a bright light here at some point. Maybe I walked into it with the scene with the headlamp. You'll just see a lot more brightness in the horizon. Like if there were lights on the tree, that'll show up. If so especially if there was any wind and the branches were blowing, you'll see the motion possibly with the light more than you would with if you use a minimum value algorithm. You could just do straight up minimum value. That'll really darken things. Then let's see here. You can just play with this and see what they do. So this will probably be very similar to the one that we saved. You can see there's still a bit of an artifact here. So even with this algorithm, so I'm not sure what's causing that. But overall, like I think this solution, this algorithm is giving a very acceptable result as well as the minimum horizon noise. Those are looking really good, and if we look at the sky, we can see the details here. There's a lot of noise, right, because these are ISO 10,000 images. But if we go to a single image here, you should be able to see a significant difference in the noise between that and the composite image. Yeah, look at that. Look how much cleaner that is. Just stacking 11 images here, like really cleaned up the detail. And then we should be able to, after we save it, like we did before, we should be able to flip over to Photoshop real quick here. And in Photoshop, this was my attempt earlier today. Let's open the attempt that I just did. I don't know why it insists on opening on the other window. There we go. So this is the image that we just saved. If we go into here, you can see there's the details on the horizon here. They're looking pretty good. And I'm not sure what that is actually, the bright light. I can't remember what was in my scene here. This is in this shot was in Bryce Canyon, I believe. Yeah, I think this was Bryce Canyon. Sorry about the alarm. But this was in Bryce Canyon, so there was probably someone standing there with a headlamp or something. I don't know. But for them to be there for 11 shots in a row, that'd be like, I guess it's only a couple minutes at 5 seconds per exposure. But yeah, it's probably someone with a headlamp, most likely. All right, so how would I edit this photo from now? So this is basically just a single exposure image. So I would unlock the image, maybe duplicate it so that I have a backup copy here, and then I'll go to this layer, the copy of the image, and go to camera raw filter, and then we'll look at the settings here. So right, the first thing you want to do always is get the color balance right. So the way to do that, or the way I do that, is I completely blow out the color balance, and then I attempt to align the histograms up in the corner here. So you want your greens, your reds, and your blues to all align if you can. Sometimes some images that's not possible. So this is already significantly better. Oh yeah, one thing I should note, this is shot on the Astro modified camera, so you're gonna get always a reddish hint in the raw data. So you can see my changes here got it pretty close. We're probably still a bit more on the reddish side than I want to be. So I'm gonna slide slightly green here till I see greens, and then I'm gonna come back and see where I think it looks good. The other thing you can do is you can pick an area of the photo, and then if you see I'm hovering over the this area, you can see up in the top corner here when I'm hovering there the colors of the image, and you can see that the red is at 28, the green is 32, and the blue is 30. So you're slightly greener than it is any of the other colors, but then you want to come and look and see does it look so green that I'm concerned that it might be an issue for the image. Like if someone looks at this, they might say, "Oh, that looks disgusting." And then in this case, I think it probably looks okay. And then we can test this across different parts of the image. So if we go to the sky, you can see it's still predominantly red here, which we don't necessarily mind that much. You can try to create the white areas here more white. So one way to do this would be to come to the color mixer. And this is probably, I would say, the best way to do that. If you think your image is too red, you can come here and drop the red saturation like this, and that'll make the image less red overall. But keep in mind when you're doing that, right, if you have any red nebulas here, right, they're going to lose their saturation as well, right? So you have really red nebulas here. So you want to be really careful, like not to go too hard on that. So if you want to do a slight reduction, right, so if we start at 0, right, you can see they're really red nebula, the background is red. If we drop this down maybe 10 to 15 here, you can see we're much closer to color balance in the background, and then we have still reddish nebulas, which is closer to what we want. And then also, right, the other concern was the green in the foreground is definitely a little bit green. So it's green in any sky image is not necessarily a good thing. So you definitely, in this image, I would definitely want to drop the saturations of the green. So you can start here and then lower it until you get greens like this. Let's see what it is it now. It's the greens and the blues are about even, and the reds are a little bit lower, which is probably understandable considering we dropped the red saturation down. And so then you can select the eye up here to see if what difference your changes are making in the image. So it's not a major change, but I think it overall the image you have a better result with this. So I kind of wish I had a specific image where I had shot on track the foreground sky together. That was better than this, so you could see more details in the foreground. But this was the best one that I had offhand, and all the data I shot of the Milky Way over the summer. So now we can get back into the rest of the edit. So we may actually come back to the colors and the saturation. Probably we want to increase the vibrance and saturation a little bit and see what that looks like. See if we're happy with it. And you can, again, play with these a little bit more. If you, like something like that. I think that looks pretty good. And then the rest of the edit is really based on your preference, right? So you probably want to increase the lighting, but you want to be really careful. So the foreground is super clipped down here, so you're never going to remove the details or bring out the details, I guess, of the foreground. So I would keep that silhouetted, and then you probably want to increase your contrast, right? Because one thing that I would say you definitely want to aim for, and what I definitely aim for in my images, is you actually want the dark part of the sky to look dark. So it's really easy when you're editing your photos here to to just bring up the exposure, to bring out the details in the Milky Way or Orion or whatever you're capturing in the night sky. But then you lose the contrast with the dark. And so, I mean, anyone who's been out in a dark sky location looks at the sky knows that it looks mostly black, right? And then there's some stars, and then there's some nebulas and other stuff that you can see, but predominantly things look black. So you want to, in some ways, create that same dark contrast between the dark areas of the sky and then the bright areas. And so you can do that with contrast. You can do that with the curves tool here too, if you want to use that. It's another really common tool that you can use. And again, you don't want to get too crazy with this, right? So the clouds here, right, you probably don't want those to be clip black. If the horizon is your darkest black point, then the cloud should be darker, and then the sky that it can be as dark as you want it to be. Another thing you're going to notice about this particular image is almost all images, unless you did some pre-processing on them, is they're going to have vignetting around the corners. So you can see that the corners are much darker than the center of the image. So you can correct this with the optics here. You can see I can very quickly go too far with that. But if that's bothering you, you can increase it a little bit. I wouldn't go too far with this. And it's possible that the vignetting actually helps frame the Milky Way in the image, or the clouds or foreground or whatever you have in your image. And then and you can go to the effects here, and I like to add some clarity. Again, you can see this is just adding contrast in a different way than the contrast under the lighting tab here. If you want to bring out like details in your Milky Way, you can add texture. So if we slide it to the left, you see everything becomes blurry, and then it takes the texture takes the detailed areas of the image and creates more contrast in them. So that can cause problems for your image though too. So you want to be really careful that you're not going too far with it, or you'll see some weird effects in your image. So again, this is personal preference. I give moderate amounts of texture. I like the way the clarity adds to the contrast. And then in some cases, you might want to add some dehaze. So in this particular case, the Milky Way sky is really, really clear. And then you've got clouds. So I think the dehaze in this case is not helping this image, because it'll reduce the blur of the clouds here, and the amount it's going to help the Milky Way detail it's not going to very much in this case, because there really aren't significant high clouds here or air glow or anything else that could be obscuring the detail of the Milky Way. So I'd say in this image I would not use any dehaze, but in an image like a lot of the winter images I've been shooting lately, dehaze has been super important because of all of the high clouds and smoke and other stuff in the atmosphere that have been obscuring the sky. So yeah, the other thing we talk about is the detail. So with night images in general, I don't use sharpening. Sharpening doesn't usually help your image. In fact, many images, it will make your sky look worse. So I do not recommend sharpening. But the color and noise reduction can be extremely helpful to your image. So if we zoom all the way in here, we see there's a whole lot of color and noise. So we will add color noise reduction around 25 here and see what it looks like. And yeah, it looks pretty good. So again, with all these things, right, they have the potential to reduce the detail in your image and to make your image just look wrong. So you want to be really careful how you're editing these things, and you're not taking things too far. There are cases where you can go a lot further than this. In this case, there's no need to do that, because with 25, you can see if we turn this off, there's lots of noise. Turn it on, almost all the color noise is gone. You can see there's also a lot of other noise here, since these images are ISO 10,000. And so we can try to add some luminance noise reduction here to see what that does. So if we go all the way in there, you can see we're just losing all of the detail. So if we scale it back here, we just got to get to a point where it's helping the image and not removing relevant details, I guess. So normally a general rule is you don't want to go much further than noise reduction of 15. Sometimes it can make sense to do more, but many times it won't. And like again, when you're zooming out in this image, you frequently will not actually see a huge difference in detail between the noise reduced images, right? The color noise, the regular noise reduction. So these types of things are maybe optional if your entire goal is to post on social media. So yeah, so this is the result of the 10 frames or whatever stacked from the Starry Landscape Stacker, and they're shot at 10,000 ISO. So the fact that you got this level of detail without too much noise is pretty cool, actually. So that's another way you can shoot your images if you don't have a tracker. You can just shoot very high ISO images and do a stack. Maybe I would recommend more than 10 images. So if you these are 5-second images, so they don't take long to shoot. So if you shot like 40 or 60 of these, some people say you should do the powers of 2. Not sure how much of a difference that makes, but if you shot like 64, then you could merge them all together and you'll get an even cleaner result than this, and then you'll see more details. You'll have to do less color noise reduction, and yeah, depending on the scenario, that could work well. In a scenario with clouds like this, you might want to think about the cloud motion. So this is probably 1 to 2 minutes of cloud motion. So if the clouds were moving for 5 to 10 minutes, they might cover more of the Milky Way here. So that could be a concern if there's clouds when you're shooting. So like you have to take all these things into consideration when you're out in the field. But if you just have a clear sky, I say shoot as many images as you can. All right, so I think I'm happy with how this image looks. You've got a nice Milky Way, you've got the clouds, the foreground looks reasonable. So we will hit OK here and call this edit completed. So you can see we went from a really flat looking image like that to an image like this with a really natural edit. I think a lot of people would think this kind of looks like what the Milky Way would look like on a clear dark location during the summer. So yeah, so we have 10 more minutes now, so I wanted to quickly jump back into the Starry Landscape Stacker. So let me jump back over to that window. And I'd like to cover a different image. Let's see, open. And we're going to go to a shot that I took at Mesa Verde. So this one is going to be a different use case actually. And let's see if I can find, there we go. And yeah, here, and then let's see which images is it. And my cat is here wanting attention. 462 to 472. So we'll select those. And again, since I saved the settings last time, the default should work. So we'll just import those. And while it's importing, maybe we can say hi to my cat. Hey. Yeah, meow. All right. So you can see that the sky loaded here. And again, we have the same workflow we had last time. So the one difference with this set of images versus the other one is this set of images was taken on a star tracker. So I believe these are like 60-second exposures. I can't remember the exact details. Probably 1600 ISO and maybe f3.2 or f4. I can't remember for the aperture. So yeah, so you can see by default it selected the dots. It did a relatively good job of figuring out what the sky is here. Again, right, like we did with the last image, you can paint in more of this if you think it could do better, selecting what is the sky. And once you're happy with painting this thing in, then you can go through the next steps. And let's say that's good enough. Not perfect, but it'll get us close. So then we want to find sky. All right, so this one is doing something interesting here. So we see that it masked a bit of the most of the sky here pretty well, and it missed upon the corner here. So for whatever reason, it doesn't think that's the sky. So we probably want to fix that. So we'll select the sky brush and then brush that in here. And then another thing you'll notice is that there's a bunch of trails and stuff here. So the trails are actually the lights on the horizon moving. And so since the sky was not moving in this set of images, it was the foreground because it was on a tracker. Then the software is not intended to merge this type of image. It's intended to merge either just sky images or sky images with foregrounds that are in a static position. So it seems like that's a limitation of the software, and it behaved like this for 3 or 4 different sets of data that I tried it on. So we can take this mask here by default and see how the composite looks to see if we're happy with it. All right, and so you can see here that it it didn't blend the foreground at all in this image, and then it's got a kind of messy edge of the horizon to the sky here. So part of that just has to do with the fact that like this foreground moves through the image, so things are not going to be clean. Part of it could also do with the mask. So since we don't care about the foreground in this image and we only care about stacking the sky, we probably want to prioritize stacking the sky over blending the foreground in. So in this case, what I would do is I go back to edit the sky, select the sky mask, and then what I would do is I would just paint in all the way down to the bottom of the solid foreground here so that we can maximize the amount of a blended sky area that we'll be able to use in our composite photo, which hopefully I captured another foreground for this one. We may just cover this stacking here though, and not do the whole blending process. But if you were doing the full blending process, you want to have the maximized amount of sky selected here so that that can be blended with your foreground image. So then, now that we've painted this mask in, it's covering the edge of the horizon here, then we can hit Align Composite here. And we'll wait for that to happen here, and maybe I drink some water so I'm not losing my voice. All right, so you can see here that by doing that masking, we gained more details of the sky, which was the goal. But you can see it did weird things to the horizon lights. And so, like I was saying in the beginning when we started this stack here, that it blends for for static horizons, not moving horizons. And so, since the horizon is moving and we masked the foreground as part of the sky, it tried to stack the aligned star image with the foreground lights, and so the foreground lights are trailing because they appear to be moving to the software when because the stars are aligned. So for this image, right, we don't care about that because the goal is to take this image and to blend it with a foreground. So again, you have options for the algorithms here. I've found that this min horizon noise one is doing, by the default one, is doing a good job. Again, if you're seeing weird problems on the foreground, you might try some of these other algorithms to see if you can improve your results. So then you would save this image, and we'll save that. And then we have 10 minutes, so we'll quickly see if we can do an edit on this. So let's jump over to, let's see here. Mesa Verde. And then we'll see the image we just saved. So yeah, we got this here, this sky, and then I have a foreground here somewhere. Yeah, this one. So I'll be the first to admit that this foreground is probably not the best foreground I've ever captured, but we can use it for an example here real quick. So we're gonna duplicate this so that if we screw up the layer, edit the layer, we can come back to it. We go to camera raw filter, and since I want to spend more time on the merge, I'll quickly jump over here and we can try some of my presets here and see if they actually do a good job. Let's do that. That looks closer. So we go through these. You can see there's like a cactus in the foreground here. Again, like I said, this is not the best foreground I've ever shot, but for purposes of this edit, we can quickly go through this. So we probably want to bring the highest highlights down so they're not blowing out the image. We may want to bring them up a little bit. We may want to bring the shadows up more, or even potentially the whole exposure of this image. So again, you can use a histogram here to see how bright things should be. The color balance in this is actually not all that bad. And we want to make sure that we don't lose the contrast here. So I can see up on the horizon here that this area of the image was looking kind of grainy, right? So you really want that to look dark, and it should not look grainy. So that's what happens when you take an underexposed image and increase the exposure significantly. The dark areas you're gonna struggle to keep those looking good. So you can play with the different settings here and come to different results. So let's say this looks good enough, and then we'll do a quick edit on the sky image. We'll do the same deal here where we duplicate the layer, and then go to the camera raw filter. Then we'll come here, we can maybe apply this same setting here. Obviously the exposure is too high, and we probably want to make totally different edits to this than we did to the foreground. So a few things immediately stand out. There's like no contrast. That's the first thing I notice. Let's see. Probably want to drop the shadows a little bit here. All right, this image is looking green up in the corners. So we want to see here. So we're kind of having an issue here, right? Because the foreground is looking purplish, and then the top of the image is looking green, which is kind of an interesting case. So we can try to play with these a little bit, and I think what we're going to find is that these things are kind of complementary to each other. So if you increase the greens, so green and purple, so you're going to either increase the greens or you're going to increase the purples. Either way you try to adjust this. So instead of doing that, right, we can go over to the color mixer like we did before and say, I really don't like the saturations of the green, so I'm going to bring that way down. Again, these types of things are very much a personal preference type of thing. And the other thing you want to really be careful of is you can do the extremes in the color saturation, but you want to be really careful that you don't end up with a really ugly looking result or something of this nature. Because sometimes if you remove specific colors, usually removing greens doesn't like ruin your image, but if you remove some yellow, if you remove yellows, for example, like it's going to do weird stuff to your image, right? Especially with the clouds and haze that you're seeing here. So yeah, so we've got this here. Let's see. Am I happy with those colors? Let's see if we can go back to the tint here, make it greener since we removed the greens. All right, let's see. So yeah, so it actually looks like there's really high clouds in this, or the merge created a hazy feel to the image. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to go back and look at the original images. Like down here, it does look like there's like some high clouds that are visible, but it's hard for me to tell for sure. All right, so this is like a color balanced image. Probably I could do some more contrast and stuff on there, but we have like 3 minutes and I want to make sure we wrap up in 1 hour. So we can come over here, paste the sky here. So now we have layer 0 copy. This is the sky, and then this one is foreground, and then the other one is the backup foreground. So we want the sky to be behind the foreground. We'll come over to the crop tool here, and we will like, I don't know, general rules, you want to almost double the size of your area here. And then you need to select the sky. So there's a lot of ways to select the sky. You can do the you have to make sure, you want to make sure the foreground layer is selected here. So I was selecting the wrong layer. So if you select the sky and you say select sky, it's going to do something totally weird. Foreground, you want to select sky. We'll do this because it'll probably get us an okay result. It won't be perfect. And then what you want to do is you want to hit the layer mask here. And then you want to, I do Command I to invert the layer mask so it's only affecting the sky part of the foreground. And so now the sky part of the foreground is removed. We can select the sky layer, do a Command T to do transform here, and then we can drag the sky layer wherever we want it. So what we want to do is just drag it here until you've got the foreground and the sky lined up here. And then you obviously want the foreground blocking the sky. And then you click done here. And then you'll want to crop the field of view to this here. So now you have a merged image, and then obviously there's major problems with the horizon here. So you want to go back to the foreground mask and then select the brush tool. And since the mask is blocking the sky, the white mask will block the foreground. Maybe put your opacity down to like, I don't know, 30% or something. And then obviously if you mess it up, you can always come back here and mask it back the opposite way with the black mask versus the white mask. So I'm basically masking the foreground in. And then you just sit here and paint it in until you're happy with how it looks. And so you can see all the let's see, I don't like the opacity here, like I want it higher. So this is going to be risky because I'll probably have to come back and do some corrections. But basically just go through the layer here, and you might want to see the bright spot here. You might want to highlight the city lights there, so it'll look more realistic if the city is actually shining up into the sky. It looks like it blended nicely there. And then there we go. So you see over on the right hand side here, I have some problems with it. Like the mask is really showing up. So then I would flip the mask from white to black, and then I would just come here and just paint along the edge here just to clean up the details. So let's see where that part looks okay. this looks pretty bad here. So we want to go along this area here. And then as you get closer to the horizon, you're going to want to reduce the opacity so that you're not masking as much of the stuff away, but you're blending properly. So there we go. So if we do this here, and you want to be really careful there. I clicked off the edge there. It looks like it messed up the horizon line a little bit, which probably no one would notice, but like I'm super picky, so I would go back here and try to paint that back in again. Like here, let's see. Yeah, so I think this is pretty close to a finished image. Obviously the sky could be having a little bit more contrast to it, but this actually turned out better than I expected. You got the cactus here in the foreground, you've got the Milky Way in the sky, you've got the lights on the horizon. It's pretty nice actually. So that's how I would edit like this type of image. So if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below, and hope you enjoyed this episode. Next week we'll cover how you would do this type of stacking on a Windows computer. So there's a software called Sequator for that. So unfortunately the Sequator does not work on a Mac, and the Starry Landscape Stacker that we used for today does not work on Windows. So we have to swap up the software, unfortunately, but I think both of the Starry Landscape Tapper and the Sequator software are very simple. So whether you're on Mac or Windows, you can just select the correct one and make sure that you're using that for your stacking your images.